Moving on to shadow credentials. Let's begin with an introduction to PKInit. Kerberos-based systems, particularly within Active Directory, require clients to undergo a preliminary authentication phase before receiving a ticket-granted ticket from a key distribution center. This initial step strengthens security by preventing potential attackers from obtaining an encrypted data packet, which is secured using a key based on the client's password. Without pre-authentication, these attackers might try to decrypt this data offline, a method similar to what is seen in Azra roasting attacks. To carry out pre-authentication, clients need to encrypt a timestamp using their credentials, effectively demonstrating to the KDC that they possess the legitimate credential for the associated account. Importantly, a timestamp is used instead of a static value to thwart replay attacks and enhance security. Now there are two primary approaches to pre-authentication. Let's start with the first approach, which is symmetric key approach. This is the more commonly used method where a symmetric key is derived from the client's password, often referred to as secret key. In scenario involving RC4 encryption, this key corresponds to the empty hash of the client's password. The KDC holds a copy of the client's secret key, enabling it to decrypt the pre-authentication data and authenticate the client. Subsequently, the KDC employs the same key to encrypt a session key, which is transmitted to the client alongside the TGT. Now let's talk about the second approach, which is the PKInit approach. In this less conventional asymmetric key method, the client possesses a public-private key pair. To perform pre-authentication, the client encrypts the pre-authentication data using their private key. The KDC on the other end decrypts the data utilizing the client's public key. Notably, the KDC also maintains its own public-private key pair, which facilitates the secure exchange of a session key. Enabling PKInit in an Active Directory environment isn't a universally straightforward process. It hinges on the requirement that both the key distribution center and the client possesses their respective public-private key pair. Nevertheless, in cases where the Active Directory environment is equipped with Active Directory certificate services and a certificate authority is readily available, there's a seamless solution. Under these circumstances, the domain controller can automatically acquire a certificate as the default configuration. What if there is no PKInit enabled? Microsoft has introduced a concept known as key trust, designed to facilitate passwordless authentication in environments where certificate trust is not supported. Under the key trust framework, PKInit authentication is established using raw key data rather than relying on certificates. In this model, the client's public key is stored within a multi-value attribute referred to as MSDS key credential link, which was introduced starting from Windows Server 2016. These values within the attribute are referred to as key credentials. They are serialized objects that contain various pieces of information, including the creation date, the distinguished name of the owner, a unique GUID representing a device ID, and notably the public key itself. It's termed a multi-value attribute because it can accommodate multiple linked devices associated with an account. One significant advantage of this trust model is that it eliminates the necessity of issuing client certificates for all users who wish to employ passwordless authentication. This streamlined approach simplifies the authentication process in environments where traditional certificate-based trust is not feasible or practical. When a client initiates a login process, Windows makes an attempt to execute PKInit authentication by utilizing the client's private key. In the context of the key trust model, the domain controller has the capability to decrypt the pre-authentication data by directly employing the raw public key stored in the client's MSDS key credential link attribute. Following a successful pre-authentication process, the domain controller proceeds to establish a session key exchange. PKInit allows smart card users to perform Kerberos authentication and obtain a TGT. In situations where access to a resource necessitates NTLM authentication, a unique solution is employed. The client can acquire a specific type of service ticket which incorporates their NTLM hash. This hash is securely stored within the privileged attribute certificate, which is PAC. encrypted in an entity known as NTLM supplemental credential. This approach ensures secure and authenticated process or secure and authenticated access to the required resources under the NTLM protocols. The privilege attribute certificate is nested within the secure segment of the ticket, where the ticket's encryption is carried out using the service specific key. For a ticket guarantee ticket, this encryption is done with the KRBTGT's accounts key, typically beyond the decryption capability of the user. To acquire a ticket that is decryptable by the user, they need to engage in a Kerberos user-to-user authentication process directly towards themselves. This implies that if you have the capability to modify the MSDS key credential link attribute of a user account, you are then able to obtain the anti-hash associated with that user. The permissions to modify the MSDS key credential link attribute in Active Directory are typically granted to accounts that are members of the following groups: key admin, enterprise key admins. Let us now see how we can exploit this attack vector to gain control over the domain. We had already identified a path that can be used to perform the shadow credentials attack. Open Bloodhound and search for the user AG Shane. Remember that we had cracked this user's password through SREP roasting. Upon further enumeration, we can observe that this user is a part of key admins group, which has the add key credential link privileges. This means that any member of the key admins group can modify the MSDS key credential link attribute. Here we will be modifying the MSDS key credential link attribute to perform shadow credential attack on the domain controller DC. In order to update the attribute, we need to first spawn a session as the user AG Shane. For that, we can use Rubius with the AskTGT module along with the username and password with the PTT flag to pass the ticket to cache and impersonate the user AG Shane. Now we can update the attribute by running the command whisker.exe add and the name and the machine as the target DC $. This updates the attribute and provides us with the Rubius command to extract the NTLM hash of the machine. Run the command obtained from Whisker with Rubius. We can see that Rubius authenticated to the KDC as the domain controller machine account and extracts the NTLM hash of the domain controller. It might take a few tries to authenticate to the domain controller after modifying this attribute. Let us save this hash in our note, which we would be using later on the dump the hash from the domain controller. Now let's talk about prevention. It's typically advisable to actively review all incoming object control related to accounts with high privileges. In the same way that users with privileges lower than domain admins shouldn't have the ability to reset passwords for members of the domain admins group. Users with low trustworthiness or security clearance should also be restricted from modifying the MSDS key credential link attribute of privileged accounts. A more targeted preventive measure involves incorporating an access control entry to prohibit the principal everyone from altering the MSDS key credential link attribute for accounts not designated for key trust passwordless or passwordless authentication, especially those categorized as privileged accounts. Nevertheless, an attacker possessing privileges like right owner or right decal could bypass these protective measures. This kind of override can be identified through an appropriately configured SACL. Additionally, leveraging key trust account mapping offers a direct approach to compromising both user and computer accounts in Active Directory settings. This is particularly relevant in environments that support PKInit for Kerberos authentication and operate with a Windows Server 2016 domain controller at a corresponding functional level.